right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Alley Report, part of the Service Department. And today we're talking with Louis Paredes about his books. He's got Out on a Limb, and he has one coming out soon called Headhunters. And I don't know, I want you to tell our viewers a little about yourself.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I feel like I'm in really good company with the YouTube interviews and the upcoming convention.
Mhm.
Yeah, my name is Louis Paredes, and I am a weird fiction writer based in New York. And I've been doing fiction for the past few years now. I started writing as a kid and did a lot of work in journalism. I had my own publication for a few years, and it wasn't until the COVID lockdown that it really dawned on me that if I don't get cracking at telling stories now, it might not happen. And so that was kind of the inspiration to finally get some stories on paper and get them out into the world.
Okay, yeah, because I saw on your website you talked about, you mentioned like, 2 years ago, I really wanted to like buckle down and make this happen. You said you did some stuff with journalism. Has that like impacted your approach to fiction?
It's hard to tell. I think it becomes things like when you get into journalism and doing straight news or narrative news, feature writing, it all seeps into you to the point where it's like you just don't know where the influences start and end, you know? And I think the short answer is yes, it's always influenced how I approach my fiction. And I think the biggest takeaway from it is always trying to say more with less and just keeping my writing as tight as possible. Because I think I still hear editors saying like tighten up that lead. If it's
Right.
25 words, make it 15. It's like how do you make an impact in the smallest amount of space as possible? Um, and I think yeah, that's the biggest influence in terms of with my fiction writing.
Yeah, my day job is copywriting. It's kind of the
Oh,
same thing. It's like say as little as you can, especially like with stuff you post on social media. So I think that's mainly like I try to be clear, concise, like how much can I say with as little as possible?
right. Right, and it's helpful, and I think it's really good. My favorite writers are those that are punchy, like that are just clear cut.
Yeah. Um, I know you said you're more of a weird fiction writer, and I think one thing to me that makes weird fiction is that it's not really constrained to a genre. Like it can be anything, and it seems like fantasy is a big influence on your books. Even if they're horror, there's always a major fantasy element.
Yeah, definitely. And when I first started writing my fiction, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write horror. And for whatever reason, like that was a genre that stuck with me. Maybe because some of the short stories I tried writing at first leaned into that. Um, and quickly I found out that I was blending genres in a lot of my stories, and fantasy always plays a huge role. And it's mostly like urban fantasy. I don't think I've written anything yet that is kind of like Lord of the Rings fantasy-ish
Yeah,
that seeps into my current work. But it's more like the occult and magic, urban fantasy again, things of that nature that kind of blend in to what I'm doing. So horror elements, fantasy elements, and sci-fi. I have a novel that I'm trying to get out there. That's my first sci-fi piece, but that
oh,
also
nice.
blends horror. That also blends in fantasy as well. So it's kind of like a very weird mix of stuff that I hope works.
Yeah, I mean, Out on a Limb has a strong hook to it. The tree
Yeah,
starts sprouting human limbs. Like that's a great. It's like okay, I would like to know more.
great. Yeah, yeah. I love that little universe that I created. Because it's funny, it's dark. And I tried to make it as accessible as possible. So it's not you're walking into the world that like yeah there are talking animals but it's not so crazy like you could walk into that world and just kind of like do your day-to-day life in it.
Yeah. I actually listened to another interview you did on another podcast where you talked about how, this one's going to expand to a series, but you've basically written the first book and the third book before you wrote the second book.
Yeah, and yeah, sometimes you just don't have control. Like the stories just take you on a ride, and you finish one and you start the other. And in that case, I definitely started book three before I started book two. And in terms of release, I'm tempted to release um, book three as book two, where it takes you to a different part of the country and doesn't follow the same main characters. But at the end is going to kind of segue back into those two characters. So we'll
I
see.
mean, I could see that working,
Yeah.
um, and I feel like whenever I write anything, that's the key to finishing it is I have to know exactly how it starts, exactly how it ends, and those are going to be my anything in the middle. So I mean, even with a
Yeah.
series, like you know how the first book and the third book,
Yep.
um, and with Headhunters, that's going to be it for pre-order soon. It
Mhm.
almost seems like it has like a YA bend to it. Is that something you were like interested in going in, or is that just kind of how it developed? Or
Yeah, it's just how it developed. I wrote it as with an adult audience in mind. And despite the characters being 11, Edgar
yeah,
Toombs and Clara Diaz, they're both 11 years old. They're kids, but they're facing like this horrible predicament that they're in with these demons coming in from another world and trying to kill them. Um, and I was tempted to kind of turn it into a YA novel, but I looked at some of the inspiration behind this book is a book like The Thief of Always,
yeah,
and also Nick Cutter's The Troop. Both feature young kids, but they definitely don't hold
yeah.
back
They're
any.
not. Yeah, they're not meant for children to read.
Great,
Not
especially
going to
with
give
the
my
truth.
kids the truth. Not yet,
Great.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember reading The Thief of Always, I think when I was probably like 14. So definitely not a young kid, but young enough that I could see how it would appeal to someone my age and also people younger and older. And with Headhunters, that's what I want to do. I kind of want to make like this book that feels forbidden for a young reader, and also for an adult reader. Like they're not quite sure what they're going to get into, when they read the synopsis or when they see the cover, they're like, this looks interesting. The adult might say, I'm not too into YA, but this is not a YA novel, and hopefully that hooks them in. And the same for a younger reader, like this looks like it could be for an adult, but that's probably going to be the drive.
Yeah, I think that's for any like horror reader. I feel like that's that. There's that stage about in elementary school, start of middle school, where like the grown-up horror novels are forbidden, and you kind of sneak those, and then like your parents realize the damage is done, so they say, "Ah, screw it, you can read what you want." Maybe that was my experience.
Right. Right. And I think and I hope that's the case. It's like and above all, like I hope people enjoy it and the characters stick with them.
I mean, it seems like a fun concept. Like I love like the mantis style, like insectoid,
Yeah.
monster, just as far
Yeah.
as you can get from human.
Right, right. And that's always been a lifelong obsession. It's just bugs and weird things. And I think the book is also kind of like an exorcism of sorts of influences, because we all have them, like
Oh yeah,
other people's works, in books and movies, whatever it is, kind of seep into your subconscious and out into what you're doing. And like I said, like The Thief of Always was a big influence, and movies like Aliens as well,
yeah.
So in this book, you have these demonic mantis shaped, but 9 foot tall mantis shaped demons. And when they expose themselves to humans, their mandibles spread apart, revealing a human mouth and nose. Like the lower part of their face is human. Like there's something
Oh,
about
that's
them that
creepy.
crosses over. Yeah. And they're sadistic and they're mean and they're awful. And they feed on ghosts. And so that image of like the mouth within the mouth is definitely an alien's influence.
Yeah,
And also, if you remember the movie Communion,
yeah.
I saw that way too young as well. And I remember a scene where the little gray alien takes off his mouth plate and reveals like another mouth with these sharp little teeth. And
Mhm.
that image has always stuck with me. And I think by far, even more than aliens, that was kind of the influence behind the bad guys in Headhunters.
Yeah, yeah. I have a thing with communion because like when I was really little. like my parents read that book, so they had it. So I'd be like three, and I would just stare obsessively at the cover, and then have nightmares about the Greys. And, and I saw that most movies. I saw that movie years later, and the movie Communion when you're not a kid is a pretty goofy movie. But
Right.
like it's still like the second the first aliens peek around a corner, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, it was awful. Um, yeah, it's funny how book covers do that. Because again, another one that I remember as a kid is Necroscope by Brian Lemley. That
Yeah.
skull with the tongue coming out, it's
Mhm.
like that's forever seared in my mind.
Yeah, it's like the old like that that 80s, 90s, it would be that and the VHS horror covers that would
Right,
be the
right,
painted covers that were in no way reflective of the actual content of the movie, but
right.
were enough to scare you or make you want to rent.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's so much fun.
Oh, yeah, I love. I don't know if you ever watched. There used to be a show. Maybe it's called Monsters and Mysteries of America or something like that, and it was about people that said they saw strange things. And there was an episode where some guy swore he saw like a 6 foot tall praying mantis, and
Oh, wow.
and, and it was just great because the interview was basically him saying, "I know it sounds crazy. It was right there, like I saw it." Like
Great. That's amazing.
he was
I'll
so
probably find that
defensive. I don't know
interesting.
why he agreed to be on that show.
Yeah.
Um, when we talk about like exercising your influences, I think a lot of writers do that where they have the I want to one day do the It style book, or I want to make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre book. Like, do you have any others that are like in the back of your mind that one day I'm going to do this kind of book or this kind of book?
Right. Yeah, I'm sure I still do. Like I said, I think it's also a very subconscious thing as well.
Yeah,
So you're not always aware of it. Um, and I feel like right now that I'm in a good place where I don't feel that anymore, you know. I'm sure it'll come back to me. Right now I'm doing another book. Headhunters is set in the town that I live in, Dobbs Ferry. And I'm
nice.
writing another book that's not connected to it at all, but is also going to feature other insectoid creatures. And I think for me, that book is an exorcism of personal experiences in my past,
Yeah,
relationships between family members, um, living in this town, things I've experienced here. So in a way, that feels like a good path to be on and progress as well, where it's like it's no longer other writers' influences or media influences. It's something that's closer to me that I'm trying to get out and into the world.
yeah, the personal stuff, the
Yeah.
chance to get revenge on the page.
Right, 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 right.
But
Yeah.
maybe you're not as like vengeful as I am. I'm just like,
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Like I'm still writing this one. So
yeah, every now and then I write a story with someone in mind that I hate. And I'm like, haha, you bastard. You don't
right.
get away this time. You're
Yeah.
eaten by
Yeah.
spiders.
Right.
Um, also, I know you got a short story coming out in June.
Mhm. Yeah, that's going to be in Max Blood's Mausoleum in June. I'm not sure what date he's releasing it on, but it's a new online horror publication that's a lot of fun. And my story is called The American Devil. And it's my take on the Mothman legacy, where it's, for me, it's like what I think of as one of the early sightings of the Mothman, but in Europe during World
Okay.
War One. And this one's told from the perspective of a German occultist who's hired by the German army to investigate a massacre that's happened on the front lines. And it's also it's a bit of a love story between this occultist and um, the major that he's meeting up with to investigate this super weapon that they've dubbed Organism 646. And the story goes into the background with their history at the German Military Academy when they were younger, flashbacks, flash forwards, and a lot of gory deaths involved between troops. And it was a lot of fun to write because one, I never expected to write a Mothman story.
Yeah.
Um, and it just wasn't on my bingo card of monsters to ever write about. And when the story came to me, it just felt like such a good placement for creature, you know, like something that wasn't here in the States, wasn't in West Virginia. Um, and the background of World War One was already horrific enough. And
Yeah.
then having this thing over there is just like, oh, this is gonna be incredible. And I hope readers enjoy it too, because it's this mixed mash of of influences there.
Yeah, I like having, that romance in a time where that couldn't be open and everything, like being the backbone of it. I feel like it
Yeah,
always adds weight to the carnage.
right,
Like the
right.
readers have something to lose.
Yep. Yeah, and it's such an interesting time period, you know, because in World War One in Germany, like there for a brief period of time, like things were much more open for a lot of cultures back then, but things went nuts.
Yeah. I think that's another like horrifying thing. I think people need to know about history is that it's not this steady march forward.
Yeah.
It's, one step forward, two steps back, and
Yeah.
that two steps back are like horror beyond horror usually. But
Yeah.
um with Mothman, do you take the view that some people do where he's like a harbinger, like he shows up before things are going to happen, or I feel like it's kind of an
No,
interesting thing people tried to wrap around that era.
yeah, yeah. No, I don't think that comes through in the story. And it wasn't the way I thought of it. I think at some point during the early drafts, like maybe some of that came through, but it's pretty much more of a straight creature feature in a way
Yeah,
than anything else.
which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, I can't wait to for that to come out. I want to check it out. I'll read it. I love all things Mothman, so
Yeah.
if it's Mothman, cryptids, anything, I'm there. Um, and oh, you have another short story out now, I think, and it looks to be more. I haven't got a chance to read it yet, but it looks more of like a almost like a detective noir.
Yeah. So I'm in a good critique group, the Weird Writers, that Robert Ottone was part of and started as well. I think he
Oh,
should
awesome!
still he's still in it. And I remember sending that story to my critique group. And when they all finished it, they're like, nothing weird happened. There weren't like angels or demons or nothing. I was like, no, this is a straight up hard-boiled kind of like noir story. And it's set in 1940s Yonkers. And it is my first like straight up hard-boiled noir story. And I loved writing it because I was able to uh, call the Yonkers Historical Society, talk to them about what the area was like back in the early 40s. The research into that little short story was a lot of fun. Um, Looking at the architecture, for example, of the Yonkers train station and the style of trains that would have been coming by at that time period. For me, it's like one of my favorite pieces that I've written because it was such a fun process. And I surprised myself by not having
Yeah.
anything weird pop up at any point.
Well, I think it's great. I think when you can step out of genres, like you don't have to
Mhm.
be defined by specifically, and then you do it well enough, that it's great.
Yeah,
Especially like that noir period. I saw someone like read somewhere where somebody described it as like it was like this was it's post World War II, and everyone is broken, and there is no
right,
one's going to everything's broken, everyone's poor, and everyone needs therapy, but it's not available.
right,
Noir.
right. Right. Yeah, and yeah, I want to get back into that too. It's just such a fun genre.
Well, that's one like I've just now kind of really started reading. I've been kind of binging a bunch of Jim Thompson books I found in an estate
Nice.
sale. Like I got a stack.
Nice.
And yeah, it's such a great genre to read, and there really is just like you can always have all these twists and turns because anybody can betray you at any time. Trust no
Yeah,
one, not even your own mother. Like, uh,
yeah, exactly.
um, and when you do research, because I found this whenever I try to research a story that um very little of it ends up on the page. It's more or less just gives me the confidence to feel like I can write it. Like before, I'm like
Yeah,
intimidated, like I don't know anything about this era, but then it's like I do the
right.
research and it's like 10 pages of notes, 3 pages of story.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. In many ways, I do like the fact that not that probably like what 90 or 95% of it doesn't end up on the page. because one, it's fun to learn and go down those rabbit holes. Um, and then I find that it pops up later. It's like you have it, like either on your computer or in your mind. Like for another story, it's like it's much more the information is much more accessible to you, and it helps like your work down the line. And I love that.
Yeah. So now you have that base where you can build. If you, like I said, talk about doing other stories in that vein, it's like, well, now you know, and you also know the specific area of Yonkers.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Like right now, I know a lot about praying mantises. You know, that stuff is just going to be in there for a long time.
Yeah, that's true. It's the weird information you gain from
Hmm.
research. And then there's like the information like my day job as I copyright. I'd make websites and stuff for a lot of like dentists and things like that. So I have all this general knowledge, but I've yet to find a way to use it in a story. It's like I know all
Right. Yeah,
this. I should. There's something I can do with this. I just haven't figured it out.
yeah, no, I'm sure with dentists, yeah. There's a horror story in there, definitely.
Oh yeah, no, it's yeah,
That's awesome.
it's just great. Like look up stock images. And it's like, all right, I'm going to type this in. I'm going to filter through hundreds of horrifying images, like of open jaws and teeth. Great. This is what I do day in and day out.
Yeah. Uh,
My horror writing's an escape. Like I'll go
Right,
back
yeah,
to
exactly.
monsters eviscerating people. I don't have to look
Yeah.
at jawbone grafting today.
Oh, yeah. Ew.
Um, well, did when can we expect pre-orders for Headhunters? 'Cause I think that's like the
Go ahead.
oh yeah,
Um,
sorry, this
Yeah, so I hope, it's May 15th today. My hope is that everything goes through by the end of the week. And at the latest next week, that we'll have pre-orders ready for Headhunters. Um, and then everything goes live. Then the official release date is August 1st for
okay.
Headhunters.
All
Yeah.
right, that's going to be a good one. And
Yeah.
also, short story coming out in June. So don't want to make sure that everybody knows where they can find your stuff. And
Yeah, definitely. And I always put a list on my website, lewisparedeswrites.com. So I always update what stories are appearing where.
all right, well, awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and looking forward to seeing everyone at the convention on October.
Exactly, Sarah Khan.